Joining us is a man who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a pleasant good evening to Mayaro MP and UNC Shadow Minister of Planning and Development, Rushton Parry. Pleasant good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening, Mikey. Good evening to your viewers and your listeners.
Yes, thank you so much. Earlier today, you did send out a release dealing with the rising crime concerns in Mayaro. Recent trends, according to what you say, indicate a worrying escalation in criminal activities in Mayaro and its nearby areas, characterized by an uptick in home invasions, robberies, and assault. I mean, this should definitely come as no surprise to anyone. I believe it was earlier this year you spoke about Tyrone Cooper and Antonio Agustin.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, those were two young men who lost their life. And at that time, you called on the government to implement measures to improve the lives of the youths in the constituency. You asked for, most importantly, meaningful employment and career opportunities. So taking that in consideration, this definitely was something that was going to happen, a domino effect that took place. But what is being done? I mean, you spoke about the hardworking police officers, but what exactly is taking place in the constituency to try to curb this uptick?
Well, what's been happening is that nothing has been done in terms of changing fundamentally the way how they operate, how they deal with the issue of crime and so on in the constituency. The Mayaro police continues to be a stalwart in terms of the operation, in terms of, trying to maintain law and order. They do the best they can with the limited resources that they are given. And that is really the challenge for us, in terms of the span of the constituency, the complexity of the constituency. There's just not enough resources in terms of manpower, vehicles, and so on to really create an opportunity to, really bring crime under control. And what's been happening as the TTPS pushes crime out of the hotspot areas, they are finding communities like Mayaro that has been traditionally a place for rest and relaxation and tourism and so on. You find they are finding a home. They are finding people of gentle nature. They are looking at businesses and they are targeting. And most recently on Monday, we had a daylight home invasion, 5 o'clock in the evening. 4 men dressed in police uniform, 2 in army camouflage, raided a home, tied up the family, and they went away with about $60,000 or $70,000 worth of equipment and jewelry and so on. And surprisingly, when the victim went into the Mayaro police station, sitting in the station compound is one of the men who were dressed in army camouflage.
Yeah.
And that shows the level of the criminal element that is infiltrating in communities like Mayaro, and we must address those things.
Yeah, upon hearing that story today, and I'm sure viewers are asking themselves if this is a Hollywood script, is this real? But I mean, this is really taking place, and it shows where people that were entrusted to protect the lives of the citizens and to serve are now basically on the other side of that divide, where you're walking to a station, you're going to give the complaint, but you say, listen, these are one of the guys that was there.
Exactly.
Yeah, but has there been any community conversations as far as among the residents? I mean, there's only so much they can do, and of course, you have limited resources. But what is the feeling like?
It's cause for concern, especially now that the community is now aware that there is the perception of police and soldiers, the men who have been enshrined with the protection of you and your property. They are the ones who are committing these crimes. And I mean, the business community is concerned. Residents are concerned. Who do you call when the police turns up by you with blue flashing light? And I think, outside of the regular town hall meetings that you have, on a quarterly basis by the TTPS, there has been no conversation outside of that. Now, again, it is, it's a cultural issue in terms of, people reaching out and so on, getting these community groups. We have tried to reach out to some of the NGOs. As a matter of fact, I spoke to the superintendent of Eastern Division clearly on how we felt about this matter. And I mean, they had some challenges, they've had some concerns. Well, I know as a fact, I have read where the TTPS has expressed concerns with these joint army patrols, stating that, sometimes some of the characters that are coming on board are less than above board. And I mean, that has shown itself because the man who they have arrested in Mayaro, he is a member of the regiment. He has a regimental number. So it is not a man who was in camouflage because he felt like this is a man in the regiment who was assigned to Mayaro to assist the TTPS, was on a vehicle that robbed these people and them. Yeah, and that is concerning.
Yeah, in your release, you also mentioned, of course, enhancing the police presence, requesting perhaps more officers, vehicles, CCTV cameras, and you said this, of course, will help effectively, of course, dealing with the situation, and more patrols and quicker responses. But it doesn't seem to really, should I say, as far as the National Security Minister, he doesn't share these sentiments. We are being told on a weekly basis that they are putting a new process, new mechanism in place, but now we're seeing it reaching places like Mayaro, as you say, that would of course affect, let's say, domestic tourism. And don't you think it's time that this is something that should be made a priority to deal with this issue once and for all?
Absolutely. And the thing about it is that when you have a Minister of National Security could tell me that one fire ambulance that is in Rio Claro is sufficient to service Beach and Mayaro, which is 200 square miles, then this man has to be mad. Because I did a release last week that Mayaro has no fire trucks. I mean, that's part of the national security infrastructure. And, you know, the man tell me flat that he has been informed that the one tender in Rio Claro is sufficient to service the entire area. And we had to use a bucket brigade 2 weeks ago to out a fire in a man's house in Ottawa. That is the nonsense that we are dealing with, Mikey. That's the nonsense that is government. That's the nonsense that the Prime Minister is allowing this Minister of National Security to get away with. And that must stop.
And let me ask you, since the murder of Cooper and August, has there been any programs, anything at all that has been implemented to help the youths improve their lives in the constituency?
Nothing. I mean, outside of the traditional programs that you get from MyLap and MyLat and those other programs, there's nothing specific, right? There's nothing specific that would address those things. But what you find happening is the movement of the bad apples into the area, and that is what is worrying to me. When you look at the fellas who are pushing these activities, 9 out of 10 times it's men that coming from outside, and they are finding soft targets in the community. And when they find these soft targets, they find one fella probably from the area, and then they coordinate the activities. But police presence is important. I can tell you for the last 2 or 3 nights, I have been out on the road, and I have seen an increase in police stops and police roadblocks, which is good. And I mean, I tell the officers that I appreciate the fact that they are out here at this hour of the night, you know, doing their job. Police presence is important. And we at a stage now in this country, Mikey, that we need to have solid police presence, especially in communities like Mayaro, where our tourism business is important for us. Our tourism is important. And if Mayaro has to turn into a crime hotspot, it hits us. Which is going to hit the hardest. Our vendors, our small business, our restaurants, you know, our cottage industries are going to be affected. So this crime is going to impact our business, and we must address that at a national level.
But if these individuals are migrating from other areas, I mean, there must be some sort of indicators, red flags going up. And I think maybe it needs to be more community-based. Or is it that the constituents feel a sense of hopelessness?
It is. It's a combination of two. So you find there are 1 or 2 areas on the Rio Claro side of the constituency where you have this community watch group. I know in Navet, they have a very strong, powerful community watch group that has their WhatsApp groups and then going and, you know, the police is involved. So that is something I plan to engage, you know, the communities in Mayaro to get their community watch groups going so that they will have the ability to, you know, keep the police informed when there are strange vehicles, strange cars, you know, cars parked in strange places and so on. You know, to notify the police. So the police can, you know, make some, you know, some pointed interventions at the end of the day, and hopefully they can deal with some of these. So that's something I plan to engage some of the community groups as early as next week.
All right. As Shadow Minister of Planning and Development, of course, and you did weigh in on the issue of the recent cyber attack on TSTT, saying that it's a stark reminder of the need for updated cybercrime legislation in accordance with international standards. I would think that at a time where so much technology that we rely on, that government and those in authority would understand the importance of having these things in place to secure the data of the citizens. Why are we still behind, the 8 ball in all of this?
I don't know if it's just a lackadaisical approach on behalf of the state. The cybercrime legislation has died twice. It has now become defunct. It was before Joint Select Committee since the 11th Parliament, which I was a part of. That is now defunct. Now, the problem is that the country is dragging its foot in terms of signing up with the Budapest Convention. The Budapest Convention is the gold standard. It's like an ISO standard for all countries to adopt in terms of its cybercrime legislation. And what this really is, how do you translate international law into local legislation? Because remember, cybercrime is cross-border.
Right.
90% of cybercrime is cross-border. So your international legislation has to be in line with your local legislation, data privacy, data protection. Your ISPs have to come under certain regulations to make sure police can access data and so on. Enhance confidentiality as well in terms of persons' data. And we seem to be dragging our feet on that, but there's another effect on that. If we are driving foreign direct investment and our global partners' data and their information systems can feel secure in Trinidad and Tobago, they're not going to come. They're not going to spend the money. So that too is a hamper to foreign direct investment in this country. So these are things that we must address at the national level. And the PNM continues to show their incompetence over and over and over and over. You have an Attorney General that seems clueless. They're bringing weak legislation. Sadly, when we go to Parliament as an opposition, the country expects us to support everything by the government. But I say no, we will support good legislation. We'll support legislation that is designed to protect the people well within the rights of the Constitution, and we will continue to support good law. The government is bringing poor law day after day, and they're not making any headway.
And that's something that we as citizens don't seem to understand, because where does the priority lie? You're talking about this entire incident has exposed just how vulnerable our cybersecurity systems are, just how vulnerable it is. And as you mentioned, if we're going to compete on a global market, one would think that we would have everything in place. And of course, we don't expect perfection. In all reality, this is happening all over the world. But at the same time, there are measures that are being put in place, and we as citizens are updated. After this incident has taken place, TSTT has yet to communicate formally with the general public on the incident. So we don't know what was sold, where the information went to, our driver's license information, credit card information, all our information, phone, what have you, is out there. And of course, people are going to purchase it. Is there something in place to deal with identity theft? And of course, all of these other factors that come in. This, indeed, was a matter of poor corporate governance.
So there's three things TSTT ought to be doing. Our data is outside in cyberspace. What we have to do is nullify the data. The first thing, TSTT should inform the commercial banks, look, these 130,000 customers I have, their credit card and their banking information is out on the web. I need you to shut them down. Let the bank communicate with every customer. We are closing off your credit card. We are changing the accounts. 2, they need to communicate with the licensing officer. Execute a project to change out license numbers, license cards. Same thing with your identification cards. But TSTT ought to be the driver. And if there's a cost to the TSTT, you have to pay that cost. That is not the customer, because our data, you by law, TSTT, agree to protect my data when I give it to you. You have failed in that agreement. The cost to do it is yours, and we need to make the data null and void that's in cyberspace and present new data at the end of the day. That is how we ought to be operating. TSTT has said nothing, and they're doing nothing about it.
And I think there should be legislation in place to deal with the decision makers in these companies, whether it be the chief executive or financial officer, who would, whatever reason, would not want to tell us the truth as to exactly what took place during any of these hacking incidents. Because at first it was denied. Then, of course, you had the line minister say he didn't know. It never happened, back and forth. And that shows quite clearly that this is not something that has been made a priority, and especially to communicate to us as citizens and as consumers.
That's correct. And as I said, the data has to be nullified. by issuing new credit cards, new banking information, new IDs, new license numbers, and TSTT has to engage the population, engage the agencies, and within 1 year change it. Because, listen, we can't solve the problem overnight, but if we could nullify the data, they could sell all data, that's fine. But if we have new cards, because how it becomes important is identity theft and fraud. We have to prevent identity theft and fraud. And that is the two big issues. And if the data is alive and it is relevant, well, then we're in some trouble. So we have to kill the data. We have to stop the data, make the data irrelevant by changing things. But TSTT should be driving this, not us.
Yeah. And I need to ask you finally, I mean, it's been 8 years. You have a clear business idea. I mean, the way you've run the Mayaro constituency, you've done quite a lot with limited resources. We are right now at an economic stagnation. I mean, forget about even reaching to inflation, as the case may be, but we are stagnant for quite some time. Looking on, where do you think are some of the key factors that government should be eyeing in order to get something moving?
I think the first thing we have to do is to call for this government to call the bloody election and give the country a new mandate to lead. You know, nothing that the government is going to do is going to change our fortune because they seem inadequate, inept, they lack ideas. I mean, Dr. Rowley now come back from Saudi Arabia with not one thing to move the country forward. Nothing. So I don't have any high hopes. There are lots of things that can be done. I've spoken about it on your program several occasions in terms of how we can drive new business, new sources of revenue, strengthen our public services organization, strengthen delivery of services, deal with the issue of crime, which is a fundamental problem in this country, fix the problems of the operators. Putting more legislation, more tools only controls how society behaves. If we don't fix the problems of the operators, the police, the judiciary, the prisons, then we are spinning top in mud. So, I mean, look, rather than having to tell the government what to do, look, just let them call the election and give up government and let somebody who could run government take charge of this country.
All right. I want to thank you so much. Any closing comments? Go right ahead.
Well, listen, I don't know if I get a chat with you before the year is over. We are approaching the Christmas season. I want everyone to remain safe. Be careful with your lighting, with your Christmas tree lighting, your house lighting. You know, we've had a spate of fires throughout the country. We do have fire services that are lacking tenders, lacking equipment. Let's not give them more job. You know, protect yourself, protect your property, and have a wonderful Yuletide season coming into 2024.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parry. Same to you and your family. Best of luck to you and your entire team, and we will be checking with you periodically. All the best for 2024 and beyond.
Thank you, Mikey. Take care. Good night.